It's YNK, so since I stole all of Thorin's gigs, at the very least, what you guys can do is subscribe to his YouTube channel, so go on and do it right now.
Right, one thing I want to ask about is this. Obviously, after this period, like you alluded to before, you had Rogue, and then you came to the OpTic team. And even though these teams had little periods where they had like a result that was good or a little spurt that things were better than expectation level, obviously they weren't at the level of like a North winning Dreamhacks and Lands and stuff like that. You know, this was like a step down in your career. At this point in time, I mean, you've sort of alluded to this in the past. Did you actually really seriously consider like maybe I have to just retire? Maybe I just never get a crack at the top again, and maybe it's not worth it.
No, not at all. I never thought that. I'm not sure. I just felt very disappointed after North, and then I joined Rogue. I actually felt very great in Rogue. I was just like, I went to Las Vegas, lived there, and I didn't go out at all. I just like played CS and grinded CS, and I was enjoying my time a lot, especially when Nico came over. Like I got Nico in from OpTic because he was benched, and he came to Las Vegas as well, and that was when we really like began to become better. And like I remember we qualified for Starlighter and won ECS over Liquid and so on. So it was big results for us because we didn't have super strong lineup, you know, like Liquid or any other team. So it felt really great. Everyone was on the same page. Everyone was working really hard. So I felt really good in Rogue. I was also thinking about not saying yes to OpTic, even though on paper it was a much better lineup. It was the same salary and so on, so it didn't really matter. But yeah, I really thought about it, but in the end, me and Nico decided to go to OpTic because we could obviously live in Denmark close to family and so on. At the same time as lineup was probably better, but I actually think we did much better in Rogue than OpTic. And obviously, when I joined OpTic, this is like some stuff that people may not know, and obviously, like it happens on the inside of all teams. Like I'm not saying that it's only happening for me or like I'm a victim, but when I joined OpTic, they were obviously gonna kick Snobby, but we used him as a stand-in because we didn't, like 3 weeks after I joined OpTic, they basically sold it to Immortals Club or whatever. Yes. So I was promised, like when I joined, I was promised that I could get a really good player or two good players if I wanted, and that I could make a strong lineup. And then 3 weeks after, they buy the organization, and basically we can't buy anyone. We can't sign anyone on contract, so we played.
If people don't get it, there's a key context here is Immortals Gaming Club obviously owned MIBR at the same time, so eventually they were probably going to have to get rid of one of these teams, and I think they were looking to sell your team, right? So I imagine they didn't want to sign players, right? They want to get rid of you, if anything.
Yeah, basically they couldn't do anything, and they were obviously going to keep Mibber, so we had to get another organization, everything. We played with Snappy. No, like the players in the team had obviously played with Snappy a lot and didn't trust him and so on to the same degree anymore. So it was very rough to play. I don't remember how long we played, but it was an uphill battle, I would say, to think that you are getting a really strong team to that you need to you can't really sign any players. And I actually think Snappy did well. Like, to be honest, he did very well as a stand-in. But when you have this feeling inside the team that some players don't want to play with this player, and the chemistry is not there, and it just goes off. And after that, we got TeSeS in without a contract. Obviously back then he was very young.
No one knew who he was back then, could they? Like, people see him now in Heroic. Now it looks obvious that you'd pick him up. But back then, I can tell you this. At the first ever Flashpoint in early 2020, he was playing on the Copenhagen Flames team and they came last place, right? I can tell you, MSL, no one even commented on this guy. I did, because I was watching me and Mouse and like, this guy's fucking aim's mental. So, like, if you look back now, if he could be anything like he was now, that could have been... I mean, obviously, here's the thing, right? That team on paper, actually, if those players are all at their peak, it was like Config, Cajun B, fucking Nico... TeSeS, that would be a fucking amazing lineup on paper. It's just obviously people were at different points in their career, right?
yeah, it's obviously really, really good players, and yeah, I think TeSeS got very, well, how should I say this? Yeah, basically he was very inexperienced at that time, and I think he learned very fast, and I think he was a really good teammate as well. Um, so yeah, I'm happy to see him succeed on Heroic, and yeah, I think not sure what else to say. I don't remember, but yeah, overall the lineup, like it was a pretty good lineup, to be honest. I also think we did a few upset wins, like we went to New York and won against FaZe. We went to at Dreamhack in Sweden, I think, and won against Liquid like 16-1. So we showed a bit, but it was not enough. And yeah, I don't remember too much what went wrong back then, but yeah, it's how it is.
Along those lines, where as you say, people will never really know the behind the scenes angle. Like, I'll give you an example. I actually had a similar story. Funnily enough, the org again was OpTic. I remember when I did my interview with Alu about his career, there was a point in his career where basically, like, he could have made like another OpTic lineup in NA, but the similar thing happened. Like, in his case, it was the opposite. They were like, but you have to just like sign now and we can't tell you any of the players. And obviously he's like, what the fuck? I'm not just signing with like no player. You can end up with no one. They're like, oh yeah, it could be good, could be terrible though. So people never know. I always think the interesting ones are the moves that didn't happen. Like, they could have, but they didn't. So what I want to ask is, were there ever actually any other periods, maybe around these years, were there any other like interesting offers or ones that you like maybe you could have gone with or you should have gone with? Did you ever get like a good offer in your career you didn't take?
Yeah, I definitely, like, when I got the offer to join back North, I also got an offer from Cloud9 to rebuild their team.
Okay, so this is
And
around the time when they had like Golden and all those guys, and they had like that weird international lineup. I'm guessing, right?
it was after that. Like, I don't think they had
okay.
team. I don't think they had a team at that time. I think it was like when Mixwell was there, one other player or something,
Okay.
and me and Nico could join, and we could get like other
Or
players.
maybe you could have joined instead of Daps. I think it was Daps they ended up getting, right? Maybe it was this time period.
Yeah, I think they were already out of the team. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. So it was after this then. Okay, maybe it was like the last one before they got that South African team, if people remember.
Yeah, maybe. I think I joined North in 2020, like January. So it was like in that break, like Christmas break. And yeah, I obviously took North because they also promised me again some things where we could change the lineup and we could get really strong players. And obviously, like, I felt pride in coming back to North, like wanting to show that they did a mistake and that I can get it back to the top. Because they did poorly after me, obviously, and I wanted to show like I can do it. Sadly, Corona hit like 1 month into me coming in, so that put a stop to all the things that should have happened. And yeah, I feel like that's what sucks, and it has obviously happened to a lot of players out there that are just not saying it, or
Of course.
stuff like this, like where something could have happened and it would have been awesome. But yeah, it was pretty rough, like having OpTic where it was promised, and I thought I would get we would get a really strong last player and so on, but and then coming to North and the same thing happens again. So the two last teams have been pretty rough for me, but I think yeah, for me now it's just time to get back to work and grind the way up.
Yeah, I mean, you've picked the perfect segue there for me to talk about this ending North period, because that's exactly the part. Like, it's funny, people are going to think because the results were bad in general in this team that I'm going to like go into it all, like, oh, what did you do? Did you fail? I always said this, right? When we were doing by the numbers and we were doing like the week by week almost like analysis of the scene and the results and stuff, I always said, I don't even know how I'm supposed to judge this North lineup with MSL. Look at the fucking players he has. Like, these players, if they're in North, they should be the worst players in North. Like, look at who like, oh, here's what I would say. in-game leader is only a fucking role. He's not a miracle worker. Like, you can only use the players you've got. It's like in football. If you're the manager and you don't have like talented strikers, you're not going to score many goals. It doesn't matter how good you are at like coaching people and tactics and telling people how to play. Like, it won't matter. The players have to be at a certain level. So in this particular North lineup, if people remember, people like Kirby at the end of their careers, they were the people expected to frag out if you were going to have any chance to win games. And obviously they weren't anywhere close to the best players. Right? You say there, obviously they promised you some other players. I always thought that was the weirdest thing about them bringing you back into North, dude. They brought you back, which implied they were going to try and build up the team again. But during this time period, you just had like these okay players, a bunch of them known players, and all the other talent that wasn't in Astralis just basically, as teams, just came up past you guys, like all the Heroic guys, obviously all these other names we've mentioned, TeSeS, like all these players that were out there in the rest of the scene. Like, it must have been a very depressing period in that respect, because listen, as much as I said earlier, it used to suck when you were like number 2 in Denmark and then Astralis steals your best player. It's even worse when you're just sat there and you think you've got the resources in North, they're a big football club, and all these other, like, Heroic was a tiny little team, if people don't know, before this online era. They were just like the team that would come 9th at the tournament. No one thought they were going to be like number 1 ranked team in the world. So you have to feel a bit hard done by in the North era in that sense, right? It was kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, I would say so. Obviously, they couldn't do much about it. Like, the guys that were running it was kind of like Graham and our sports psychologist, and I had a very good relationship with them. But they couldn't do so much, because COVID hit. Like, if everything was...
Do you think the funds and stuff got took away, like they couldn't spend?
Yeah, because
right.
Copenhagen was hit really hard. Like, the football club was hit really hard. They had another business, like a vacation place where people couldn't go because of COVID, so they lost.
Right.
They were bleeding really red. So yeah, it was just unfortunate. Like, there was not so much to do about it. I tried to work as hard as I could. I tried to do as good as I could, but I think, like, I also did some mistakes, like taking myself over the team in some sort, because I felt like I needed other players, like, then I should have made a better team feeling within the team for sure. And that was one of my mistakes. But I think overall I worked really hard to try and make it work. I also remember, like, after 3 months we had, like, Kirby went on the stress leave, then we had to play with Jumpy in a AMR qualifier, and we won against G2. I think we got top 6 or something, and then we had Christo coming in as a stand-in. He was a AWP player, but he played rifle. I don't know, like, that decision was really bad. I don't know why that happened. Like, it made no sense. But it also, like, I tried to get, for example, Refresh or someone in as a stand-in or as a player, but there wasn't really any resources to do it. It felt like like they were obviously hurting a lot and wanted to go a different way. Like, with it felt like they were more trying to go the talent way. But yeah, we played with Christo for 3 months or 2 months. I think it was pretty rough, I would say, especially coming from OpTic, where we also had to play, like, without any security or feeling that this is the team, like, it just creates a really bad synergy, and it doesn't do anything good. In the end, like, at the summer vacation, I remember that they asked me if I wanted to keep going, if I still wanted to go, because they knew that I was frustrated that I didn't get some players that I wanted. And but I said yes, and I wanted to keep going because I felt like I didn't really have so many other choices. Like, one thing you need to know is also, like, or probably most people know, but when you're doing bad in a team, it will go on all of you. Like, even it can be my mistake, it can be someone else's mistake, it can be all mistake, but in the end your stock is going down, and I wanted to change that. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Like, Legro came in, we did better, we played better, but we never break through. It was always like, I think we were always playing good or playing close with strong teams, But once we, like when we were playing lower tier teams, we were losing to like players I don't even know, and we had a real struggle with that. And that's also one thing that I have thought a lot about, like how to get better against.
You have to play differently, right? I think this is what people found in the online
sure,
era. Like we had all these good LAN teams that suddenly they can lose to the 30th best team.
Yeah, you definitely have to play with more confidence, I feel like, and I think like I learned some ways to be also less structured against worse teams, but in the end of the day, it's also a lot about the pressure. Like you're sitting in North, you're reading shit on the forums, like how shit people are. The pressure can come to players like very fast, especially when you're playing against lower teams. So I think that was the main problem. Always like we were playing against good teams, beating them or very close to beating them. And then against lower teams, you just get sacked your confidence every time you lose to a lower team. So and you can also see it now. Every time a good team is playing in these lower tournaments, they can also lose to them pretty easily. I think even like some of the top teams would have problems if they played some of these tournaments, because people are pretty strong and they want to give life for you for winning, and that's the hard part for players that are at the top, because obviously the motivation will not be the same for that game, for some players at least. But
sure.
I think we were always close against the good teams. It was always like 13-13, then someone did a bad mistake and we lost, and I think this is one of the key things that I have seen, like going from very, very strong players to having like decent players, is that the strong players, like for example Config, he will make maybe 2 very bad mistakes, but he will also have 2 rounds where he just go crazy and win the round. So if he did a mistake at 13-13, he might go in the 14-13 round and just crush them. And that was kind of what I felt we were lacking. And at the same time, I also felt like, what was it that I just thought about? Yeah, every time we were if we lost a player, if we were 4-5, I felt like we could never win it, because we didn't, like, also when you look at stats, like we had very, very poor multi-fracking stats, and that also goes with players just being good on their own and showing up at certain times. Like our multi-frags was so bad, like it was pretty rough. But yeah, I think that's about it. I think everyone worked really hard to make it work, especially like Kajun and Gate tried to work really hard. Like Gate was playing like crazy. So I think we did what we could with that lineup, to be honest. I think we were in top 20 or something. I think we did as best as we could. We tried a lot of things and worked really hard. So I can just look back at that and say that I worked as hard as I could. I made mistakes along the way, and the things I really need to focus on going forward is like basics, like being for me it's about being a good teammate, and like I think one of the things that I was really good in the past is know when to criticism and when to be a nice guy as well, because I think you need to do both things to not to give players belief and confidence, and like some of the basic stuff I kind of missed along the way. I don't know why, but I lost it, and going forward I would really focus on basic stuff, both in game and out game.
Okay, so perfect topics. That now basically is going to be a segment of the interview where I sort of put topics to you, like I did with the North roster moves, where it's like the community thinks one thing, but maybe there's more to the story. So one question I've got to ask about, it's another infamous meme around MSL, is that MSL actually thinks he's the best AWPer, and that's why he's the one who's AWPing all the time, and obviously people know you won the MVP doing it at that Dreamhack, right? The problem with this story goes like this, MSL. We could have, I mean, maybe we'll do it on a Strapbook episode, we could have like a whole half an hour discussion that's actually about like different ways to use the AWP other than if you have like a superstar player and how you can use it tactically. And for example, the in-game leader, if he uses it, can get certain advantages. I actually think if people saw when Glaive did it at that Blast 4 finals, part of the reason they dominated so hard is if your in-game leader's using the AWP, he's also going to use that information directly. He can cut off a part of the map. The other team doesn't expect him to have. There's a million factors can make this an interesting move, right? Put it this way. You were doing that largely, if people look at your career, like earlier in the interview when you talked about Cajun was like a supportive AWPer, aside from, I mean, it wasn't even when you were an in-game leader. Aside from basically when you were a support in Western Wolves back in 2013, you had Nico with a C. You've never really had like a dominant AWPer in your teams. You've often had like just decent players or flawed players like Mertz. So was the vibe more like, if it doesn't make sense, like no one else either A, volunteers or is a primary AWPer, and it's just like we need one at the moment, is that the main scenario where you were using it? Do you actually think you really were a good AWPer? Like, put it this way, on the other end, if you'd have had like Device or you had like more the modern day players like Farley or something, you wouldn't be AWPing over them, right?
No, not at all. Like the whole idea with my AWPing, like back in, it was in 2018, there was no, like, we had merch, but he got out, but there was no Danish AWPers. We felt like Farley was not up at that time, Aker was not up at that time, like I think even Aker was playing Rifle at that time. So like none of the AWPers was there, like there was no one that we felt like we could pick up. So we just said like, let's bring in Nico for these events, and I will play AWP a few events. And yeah, obviously I kept on doing it because I really felt like I could succeed with it, because I could finally give more impact individually. And at the same time, if I had 4 strong riflers, we would be a really, really strong team. I think I still did pretty good, like in OpTic and North, doing my supportive AWP role. Like I got a lot of impact frags, more intro frags than some of the AWPers. Like there's a lot of AWPers playing very passive and getting very good stats.
Sure.
But I did both. Like I went a lot for. I did a lot of anti-stratting and trying to find like ways I could get intro frags or ways to destroy the default and so on. So I think, yeah, in some ways it worked really good, but I think like for it to work, I would need like four really, really strong riflers to be like a strong team. And for me, I've thought a lot about it, and obviously I would really like to have a really strong AWPer. Like I actually never had it, as you said, other than Nico back in Western Wolves. So that's actually just mind blowing to think about.
Isn't it?
Like,
Yeah.
it's fucking crazy. Yeah. Imagine what could happen with a real AWP then.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking more towards rifling in the future, and I hope that I will get on a team with a strong AWPer. Because it is like rifling is where I had the most consistent success, and I definitely think like the AWP experience have taught me a lot, like both how to set up a future AWP better, how are they thinking, what kind of pressure do they feel, and all this stuff. Like I think it have made me a lot stronger. Also, just how to set up myself, even when with rifle now, I'm much better at thinking on my own and not only just the team. Back when I was rifling in 2015, 16, 17, I was only thinking how to make the team better and not really thinking about myself, which was a huge mistake. So I think individually I'm on a much better place now than ever, and I think all of the stuff have helped me towards hopefully what will become my prime, because I really believe that that I still got a lot left in me, and I just need the right team and players that will work really hard. So I just have to hope for that. Like I will keep grinding and just that I get a team that can work.
Right, another topic, which is an obvious one we're going to address in this interview, is basically why you're in this situation now, where you don't have a team and you're not getting offers from these big squads. Right, if we think of the big names in being an in-game leader in Danish and CSGO history, it basically is like Glaive, Carrigan, MSL, and then maybe you could put Snappy as like the fourth. Like they're the big names that have been around the whole time, and they've been in all these different teams. The problem is, if I had to divide those names up, there's a clear way in which there's a group that's Carrigan and Glaive, and there's Snappy and MSL, and I'm not doing it by success alone. The distinction I would make as someone in the community and talking to different players is, if I ask a player who played with MSL, like, is MSL a good in-game leader? Like, if I ask Valda, he's going to say, not only privately, but publicly, yeah, he was a really good in-game leader. The difference is this. Similar like Carrigan, I know fans might at one point in time think Carrigan wasn't that good, but all the players in the pro scene are going to tell me, no, Carrigan is a really good in-game leader. So I feel like it's easier for people like him to get into teams, because if people don't know, the story of how he even got into FaZe this last time is supposedly Cold Zero himself, like, requested FaZe client, like, can you get me Carrigan? Like, that's a pretty good way to get into a team, right? In your situation, that's what I've always noticed, is it feels like the difference. The players who've played with you say you're a good in-game leader and they like the way you've approached it. But I either get the sense that your opposition, the other players in the scene, they either don't know you like as a person that well, or they, for some reason, they maybe think you're overrated as an in-game leader, or they just don't, for some reason, they just don't fuck with you, you know, in some sense. Have you had this similar vibe when you've been out there trying to get into teams?
Yeah, it has been pretty rough, but I also think actually what I said earlier says a lot, that I went from winning a big event to going to a team outside of top 30. You know, it says a lot. I think no one getting kicked in top 5 would not get an offer from top 10. You know, so I think that says a lot. And obviously, like, I have probably made a lot of mistakes doing the way I have approached Twitter. The way I have been very controversial and made impression. And I also think that I'm a very introverted guy. So like at events, I will not talk with so many people other than my team, because I'm better with people I know. I'm not so good at new people and stuff like this. But once I get to know people, obviously I have no problems or whatsoever. But yeah, I think I'm not so good at creating relationships and connections to being introverted, and I think that could probably hurt a lot. Like where you see a guy like Kerrigan, he is really outgoing. He's good friends with a lot of people, and showing who he are from the minute you meet him. You know, so that's how it is. Like I am who I am. I think, like, I do think some people have like when they watch my team play, they have thought like he is too easy to read or stuff like this. But I can say the same thing about a lot of the teams that I'm facing. You know, all teams are pretty easy to read. I would say that for sure. In some ways, I have been too stubborn about the rounds that worked really well, especially in the teams where I haven't been confident in people doing stuff on their own, because especially like the last 3 years, I have had problems trusting the players, and therefore I try to put in more structure to make sure we don't make stupid mistakes and stuff like this. And obviously, I have also thought about that, and like, to give more trust and let them fail and then let them get better, instead of just putting structure instantly. So I think, like, what I've learned a lot is try to find the perfect balance between structure and freedom, or what you can say. Like, yeah, I think that's obviously a thing. But I do think, to touch on the topic I just said, like with reading people, I think a lot of times you can read other teams, like how they are playing. For example, I saw an interview or a clip with Janko saying that they talked a bit about me joining FaZe. I think it was with you, where he said that I was too easy to read in my defaults and stuff like this. And exactly what I said before is that I didn't trust people enough to do it more on freedom based. But what was it I needed to say? Yeah, about reading people. Like, for example, I also read FaZe a lot to New York. Like, I literally read them like an open book. And Cajun came to me afterwards and said, "Oh my God, that was fucking amazing." You know, like you can read all teams, but the thing is, one thing is looking and thinking, "Oh, this is so obvious. Like, what are they doing? It's so clear what they're doing." There's you can try and find a counter and you can talk about this counter before the game, but it can go very, very wrong.
Oh, for sure,
Like
yeah.
I have tried so many times where sometimes you can hit the perfect counter and you will feel so good, you will feel amazing, you will get confidence, they will have no way of winning the game. But it happens very rarely. Like it's maybe 1 out of 10. So it's not every game. And then there's a lot of games where you think you have the perfect counter, but it just doesn't work. Then you try the second counter, it doesn't work. You try the third. Like it's one thing reading a team, and then another thing executing the counter, and also a lot of other stuff can happen. And I do think I think my biggest weakness have been the defaults being I've trusted too much in maybe some defaults and running patterns where I should have bring in all the others as well. But I do think like tactically wise, like after the default and also in the start of the round, I have, a playbook of so many tactics that it's impossible to read. Like, so in that way, it's really impossible to read. But my main issue have been the defaults being too structured, and I will change that for the future for sure.
Sure. Actually, that's a good topic because I've got a couple of thoughts on that, and I can transition it into a question again about the current landscape. So basically, look, I'm obviously mates with Yanko. You're right. It was in the Reflections interview I did with Yanko. That's something he said a bunch of times because I've always tried publicly to press him and by implication Nico, which is if they're going to be like, oh, there was no one to get us an IGL, we had to get washed up Neo and Adren. It's like MSL was sat right there the whole time. So I've forced them to sort of explain why they didn't want you, right? And that is one of the reasons they said. The problem there goes like this, right? That if I'm doing an interview, largely I have to sit back and just listen to what the person says and goes, oh, interesting, and then go to the next one. It's not like a talk show. I can't just argue with the guy. If this was a talk show, here's the difference. I would say this to Yanko. Two things. One, you nailed it at the end there. It might look like you read what MSL was doing, but actually, if like a lot of tactical in-game leaders, he has like 10 variations on that one strat, maybe you just read the base strat and it just so happens Nico shot 3 people in the head. You think you read it. You didn't actually. Your pledge to that. And then secondly, there's one thing I do have a problem with, right? It's that topic you set it up quite well, that the time you put in maximum structure and you take away a lot of agency from players, that would be the term that people would understand, that's when you've got the least experienced players, and the players who actually basically they wouldn't know what to do in some of those situations. You're helping them by making the game simpler, right? Here's the problem. Think of the teams Yanko coached. He had fucking Cold Zera and then he had Nico and Cold Zera. It's like, bro, MSL would love to have fucking Nico go kill, and then he just worries about this pack here, and Nico kills 3 people. Like, he didn't have that player. We're talking about the era when he has fucking Kirby and TeSeS as like a 19-year-old kid. Like, here's the analogy I would give MSL. You know, at the moment, at the time of recording, the move hasn't officially happened, but it's probably going to happen. Alexi B is probably going to go to G2 is the story, right? And there's all these fans have got this narrative where they go, because I've told these stories about when I heard the comms of OG, they go, oh, I've heard Alexi B like severely micromanage people, or will that work with Nico? It's like, you moron. He doesn't want to micromanage Nico. He was micromanaging Issa and Flames, who's never played, and Mantu, who's played like 4 lands in his life or something. Like, he's not going to micromanage Nico. In fact, that's going to be Alexi B's dream. He's going to walk in the door and go, awesome, there's one guy I don't have to tell what to do. He probably knows better than me what to do in that scenario. Like, essentially, if you had... This ties into the last few years of your career. In the last few years of career, the theme is you generally didn't have the talent, you didn't have star players, you didn't have people who were getting ranked top 20 in the world, etc. If you had those players, you wouldn't be MSL from 2015, right?
No, I think it's also like one of the things that people need to look at is like when I had strong players, I also gave them freedom. Like I was not just a structured in-game leader who was just doing set defaults and set executes, like maybe Magisk asked, can I go kill B Mirage? Yeah, I said yes, do it. Like, but you need to have strong players to kind of do that. But yeah, I would say like also if you ask Valde, I think he will say that the most freedom he felt was under me, like so if I ended up in a team with Nico or whatever, like really strong players, I would obviously give freedom and just not be a only structure. And I think, it's kind of sad in me, like a lot of the times. I think in general, actually, like people have make an impression and then they stick with it instead of like, uh, thinking that people can get better or change. And me, like I also work better with stronger voices and players. Like I I feel that, like for example, when I had Valde, he came with a lot of ideas. He came with strong opinions to me as well, and I like getting this back and forth. So I get better. Like I get challenged. I cannot just be on the throne, you know. So yeah, I definitely think like yeah, I think that was what I just said there.
Yeah, fair enough. One other thing I wanted to talk about in that sense goes like this. So at the moment, one thing that's very interesting is people will know Magisk has left Astralis and he's gone to Vitality. And even though initially they've said in Vitality that Apex is going to stay as the in-game leader, etc., one of the actual real pieces of information when that set of Astralis players was going to go to other teams, they might have gone to Complexity. There's a few different teams that were in the mix to maybe buy them all, right? One of the stories a lot of people had was maybe actually Magisk is leaving because he's going to become a real in-game leader, like for good. Because if people don't know, during the time they were online in Astralis, when Glaive was out of the team, Magisk took over being an in-game leader, and they actually won a couple of tournaments. They won like Pro League a couple of times, or whatever it was, Road to Rio or something. There was a couple of different online tournaments they won, and then obviously at the recent RMR where Glaive was out because of his baby, Magisk IGL, that they won that. Oh, they didn't win it. They qualified to the major at least, you know. Like actually, he's kind of shown like maybe he can adapt his game and move in that direction. We don't know if he will yet. Now, obviously, he played under you. He played under Glaive. If people don't know, like I said at the beginning of the interview, this is kind of how in-game leaders get born in Denmark. It's almost like vampires. Like a vampire has to turn you into one or something because you were under people like in the past, like Hunden and Glaive, etc. And you became one. And basically, everyone almost goes this route, right? So my question is this. Is it at all surprising to you from the Magisk you knew that he's maybe started moving towards the in-game lead direction? Do you think he would be a good full-time in-game leader if he embraced the role? Because like the key thing is, right, you have to do like you did. You have to embrace it. It has to just be your career. You can't just do it for like 3 months and then go, maybe I'll stop doing that. You have to kind of like go all in, right?
I think I'm a bit surprised, like from the way it was back then, but you can see that he have evolved insanely a lot. And I will say, like he is working very hard. Like back then, he was also one of the guys that worked really hard. So, and he was also reflecting. So, yeah, I think that that there is some potential there, but I just feel like he is so good as an individual player that it would be kind of sad to ruin him in that way, because you get kind of ruined in some ways, like especially if you don't set yourself up. Like obviously, if you set yourself up, like some in-game leaders do, then it's not a problem. But yeah, he was. It's kind of the problem if you become in-game leader, you begin to, and you then don't do it again. It can fuck up your mind because you begin to think too much about the team rather than yourself. So, yeah. But I think he have potential, and I think he should do it later in his career though, and not now, because I think he can still very well just being individually.
Right, obviously, I mean, we sort of alluded to it with some of the stuff about North, etc., when you were talking about like the fact that the real world consequences of going online meant that there wasn't the funds, etc., and then the team wasn't in as good a position. Right, obviously, we haven't totally come out of that period yet, but I will say, I actually think what's happened at the end of last year with all these big signings, it's a very positive sign because it shows that now it feels like people are starting to move back to the old world where you make the big power moves and you try and build the squads with the big players, etc. Right? Do you think that some of your problems are they connected to the fact that like it was a more limited scene the last few years? Do you actually feel confident that like in the next say 3 to 6 months you can get an opportunity, you can prove yourself, you can climb the ladder again, as it were?
I definitely hope so. It's I have had some offers that that was, I would say, I have actually not had an offer where I felt like lineup on paper was strong enough that I should do it. And I hope it will come in the next 6-8 months. Obviously, when I saw Alexi B going to G2, I hoped a lot
You want to top into OG?
For joining OG.
Of course.
And obviously there was also some talks with Valde, but it's a pretty like obvious move. Like when you're looking at it right now, that I have been out for a year now, and nexa is in G2. Like whose stock is the biggest and so on.
Of course.
But yeah, I really hope for that. It didn't happen. We will see. We will see. Maybe they take out nexa in 8 months and I will get the chance. We don't know. But I can say I beat G2 with Kiabu, with a coach and a stand-in. That's all I will say. So tactically, I think I'm better. Just to put it, that's really cocky, but I'm just gonna say.
No, that's fair enough. Along those lines, though, one thing I wanted to ask was this: is right one of the positions you've been in, which is a really tough spot, because obviously the South experiment would be an example of this. When you are a guy who's trying to get a crack, and one day you hope obviously to be in a top 10 team again, right? The question is this: do you sit out and hope that the right people remember you and the right chance just comes along? Because obviously, like in some of these stories, like the Glaive to Astralis was the best one. He hadn't really like built himself up. He wasn't even the in-game leader of Heroic. Like I said, he just sort of, he got lucky that a moment came along where there wasn't really anyone else. And some people in the team, like Device, remembered from years back and were like, maybe we'll give him a try. Like that can happen sometimes, right? Do you wait and hope that happens? Or the other option is, people would say you did this with South. You just go, right, I've got to take whatever my best opportunity is today and hope that I can do something and build it up. But the downside of that obviously is if the team that you go to is a lesser team or it doesn't do well, that could actually maybe doom your reputation even further, right? So, because you're right, the analogy is like stock. It's like where's other people's perception. It's not even necessarily about how good you are in the game. So has that been tricky to balance, to know, like, should I just try and be active and play? Should I wait for a good enough offer that people don't judge me too harshly? It must be tough to decide, right?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. But in the end, I'm trying to just go with my stomach feeling. Like I had an offer in the summer where I could earn a lot of money, but and yeah, it just didn't fit with me, like lineup wise. But if they would have told me, okay, in the winter we will rebuild the whole team, then I would do it, But it didn't happen, unfortunately. Like I'm down to go to a lower level to prove myself. It's not like I'm expecting like, oh, I will just get top 10 offer or something. Like obviously the last 2 years have been rough and I need to prove myself again. I just have to have an offer where I feel like that I can do something. But obviously I have also thought about creating my own. I talked with some guys and it was close to happening also here in January, but it's on pause right now because of other circumstances. But it's really hard also because I made South, and that didn't do me any good. Like it's literally ruined more than doing anything good.
It seems like it. Yeah.
So it's very risky, and making a team without organization is very risky because players can get an offer after 2 months, 3 months, or whatever.
Yes.
And you can have wasted your time. And yeah, it really kind of like I was pretty broke after all this period. And when I made South, and then I put in, like, I worked hard for 1.5 months or whatever, and then Fessa decided to leave, and I was just everyone gave kind of up, and yeah, that feeling is very, very bad, especially like in the place I am right now, where I need to prove myself again. It felt pretty rough. So what I'm gonna do is just try to grind as much as I can, like just play a lot individually, watch a lot of demos, keep myself on the toes, and hopefully I get an offer that I can see myself in.
Right, obviously, people will notice the trend, especially if they've listened to interviews, that even if the results aren't as good, most people would rather be the in-game leader and still play the game and hope they can get the good team rather than go to coaching, which people feel like is the obvious, next move if your playing career isn't as good. Even though, as you say, you're focused on playing it right now. Do you see in the future, do you think one day MSL is a coach?
Yeah, I think in the future, but I still think I have a lot of good years left. So it's definitely not yet, in my opinion. But yeah, I already had some coaching offers actually here in last year, at the end of last year. But I obviously, like, I'm 27. I think I have a lot of years to go, and yeah, I think my prime is out there somewhere. Even though a lot of people will think like, "Oh, you're a washed-up player, what the fuck," and whatever. I really believe so, because like the last 2-3 years have learned me a lot, both being the AWP and yeah, everything I said earlier.
Let me ask about that then. That's actually an interesting topic. Why do you have that belief? I mean, by the way, I'm a similar person. Like, you notice, it doesn't matter what happens to me. It doesn't matter if everyone's laughing at me or I have a bad take and people will dunk on me. I always come back. Like, the next day I wake up, it's like reset. I just go on with my shit. But a lot of people aren't like us, mate. Like, some of the people I was talking about in this interview, there are tons of players where I always say, like, dude, I wish I could sort of just, like, control this guy's brain because he's a way better player than he thinks he is. Like, sometimes people, like, even people like Config lose confidence in themselves, which to a normal person, you think if you had those skills, you'd never be unconfident. But some of them are. So why do you never sort of? It seems like, listen, you might have been bombed out for a little while when a team didn't work out, but it seems like you always come back fresh, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I also have insecurities and feeling down and yeah, not confidence in myself sometimes. But in the end, like, I think you don't lose. Like, back in 2018 when we Dreamhack Stockholm, it was a very high level. Like, Astralis, it was when Astralis have already implemented everything with grenades and so on. I don't think too much have changed since then, only that people are playing a bit more on reactions and playing like a bit more loose, but it's still very detailed, very structured. All teams are very structured now, and yeah, so I think like you don't lose that just on 3 years or whatever. Like, you don't lose what you can do, and yeah, I still think I have a very high level in terms of like in-game leading and details and reading the game, and I think I got a lot better individually. As I also said earlier, I think AWPing helped me think about how I should set up my AWP later on, and how I should set myself up better, and so on. So I think all of it is work and stuff that will help me to be better in the future, and that's why I think I still have a lot of good years to go.
One thing I wanted to ask you was this. It's a question I'm always very interested to ask in-game leaders, because I'll give you an example. If I talk about Sean Gares, the old Cloud9 in-game leader, right? Even though he was a guy who liked being an in-game leader, he would tell you, like, it does get boring just looking through demos all the time, you know? Like, sometimes you do just want to do something else. You seem like a guy where, and there's a lot of other great tactical in-game leaders and similar, like, it seems from the outside that that's not the case for you. You actually sort of, like, it's fun for you in some way. Like, I'll say, by the way, it's like, if I do an article, it's fun for me to research. I know other people might be boring, but I sort of like to know exactly all the details and where they fit, and if thoughts come from seeing how things fit together. I find it really fascinating, you know, and I can just sort of put up with the boring part. Right? Are you similar? It seems like people. The most famous story is that Dreamhack Stockholm, where part of the reason you were able to do well against Device, right, is you'd watched loads of his demos. Funny enough, you did what Device has done to other people. You sort of downloaded him a bit.
Yeah, I love the details. Like, also, the sports psychologist we had in North was like a famous sports psychologist for football players and so on, and he always said to me that I was next level, like, because everything I did was what a coach would do, you know, like at the same time as playing, and my commitment was so good. So yeah, I love going into the details and really nerding and the game in the game, you know, like reading the opponent and tricking the opponent. I love everything about the details, the small details, and obviously everyone is going up in them now, like all the small details. It's crazy, like how far we come in CS. It's absolutely crazy to think back, like how it was in 2016 to now. It's just, yeah.
I have one question which ties into that because I'm going to test your analytical skills a bit here and just get your perspective. So I'm very interested to know what you think of particularly, let's say, the last 6 months or so of Team Heroic, the team that obviously they were top four at the major. They were actually a team that was even one of the teams close to beating Na'Vi. They've come up with Cadian, who obviously we all know from the old days, but he's transformed himself seemingly. Seems like he's a much better IGL than he ever was when he was replacing you in North. Like, this is an interesting squad. Obviously, the bunch of players, they're not the biggest names, but they've sort of gradually built up over the last few years. What do you think of Heroic? Like, how would you describe like their style, or what do you think of how tactical are they? What do you think of the setup of the team and the players and stuff? Give me your thoughts.
They're actually like they're very structured and tactically, I would say. Like, but at the same time, they have explosive stuff and yeah. But you can see that everything is thought through. I would say like Heroic is playing a lot like I have done in the past with structure, but obviously that's also because Hunton have had a huge impact on that, and yeah, I think they have a perfect mixture of structure and freedom, I would say, like, and they have thought a lot of the things down to the details, just like other teams. But I looked a lot of demos on them where I stole a lot of CT setups from them, because some of the CT setups they have is very, very good. And actually, like, most teams, or like obviously everyone has CT setups, but some top teams, they are going more on the fly, like playing
for sure,
playing loose and seeing what happens and so on. But Heroic is one of the teams that do more like setups that are through, like, for example, on Overpass, they have a setup where one guy is barrel holding monster, one guy is pillar holding the boost on short, if somebody boost. And actually, I think the last guy is sitting headshot with a flash ready to monster. So it's just a really, really nice setup where they can help each other in all ways, like, and it's a really hard setup to do anything about ST. Because they have counter flash ready. The pillar guy can swing monster as soon as the barrel guy have contact. Yeah, and they are just three meshing together. So stuff like this I really appreciate when it has been thought down to the details. And obviously it can also be easy to counter if you do it too much, because then people will just triple nade barrels or triple nade pillar. So, but in general, I think they are very tactically and well thought through. I do think that they have had some problems on lane, like taking the same kind of risk. And I also think Cadian haven't been playing as good on lane as he played online, which I also said beforehand that would probably happen, because it's just not the same, like,
yeah, of course,
as sitting online and getting full confidence. And I think also if we see more lanes in the future, I think it will get a bit more structured and not so much on reactive plays, because the thing with reactive plays is that you need to have very good confidence. Every player need to think very smart and on the fly very fast. And that's what Heroic also did really, really good in that online era. Like, they were so quick to react. And that also takes a lot, like, from Cadian to do that on lane, because it's very hard. Like, he did an insane job online, I would say. Obviously, I think Stown is also helping a lot for me. Like, Stown is a really, really, really strong player.
One thing I thought I would ask you about goes like this, right? If you ever talk about changing the map pool, take a map out, put a map back in, I think, like, even though Valve themselves do seem to just do it for reasons I don't know what their basis is. They just wake up one day and they change the map pool, right? People do try to discuss it because they hope that, if some hype gets going in the community, maybe Valve listens and that's the map they take out, all that jazz, right? So what I wanted to do was this. I don't know if this is more of an indictment of how I feel about Ancient and Vertigo, but with the current map pool, I am actually up, believe it or not, for you can pick one of those two maps. Whichever one we don't like the most, probably Ancient, I'm guessing. Whichever people don't like, we can take it out and you can probably see where this is going. I'm up for bringing Cobblestone back. I know it sounds mad because everyone was so bored of Cobblestone at the end. Everyone thought it was like played out, blah, blah, blah. So I thought you are obviously one of the biggest Cobblestone fans of all time. It was one of your key maps. I know you're one of the people who thought they shouldn't have taken it out. What would your argument be? Why should they bring Cobblestone back if they would? Should it be in the map pool?
They should not pick the cobblestone that is right now, at least. It's really, really bad. I just played it like the last 2 weeks. I played it 2 times. And it's, it's really bad. Like they screwed up that A side completely.
So if we go to the old one, though.
Yeah, if it's the old one, I liked it a lot. I'm not sure, like, the thing is, back then it was not so detailed and structured as it is now, so you don't know what you get out of a map like that now and how it will feel, so it's really hard to say, but obviously I would like to play it. And I think, like, for example, a map like Ancient, I haven't tried it on a team, so I have only tried it in POC, so it's pretty rough, but I think Ancient have too many like weird duels where the CT is so favored, like in Cave, like. But obviously, I haven't tried it on pro teams. Maybe people are using utility really well, and the CTs can't stand there. But it's not the thing in POC, you know. It's just a run and gone. So yeah, I'm not sure, but I don't like Ancient too much, at least in POC. So I would probably change that for a couple if it was possible.
Right, at the end of this interview... Oh, sorry, go on.
2 is also, I think, at least also in POCs, pretty rough with the new update. I feel like it didn't
do the thing blocking the spawn area and then grenade dropping. Okay.
I don't feel like it does so much. I just feel like it's annoying that the T's need to use so much time and so much utility to just get the lower area, and yeah. But that's also in POCs. Maybe it's easier, it seems.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, at the end of this interview, do you have any final message, or is there anyone you want to thank or say hello to?
Not really, but if people want to watch some good CS, they can go on my stream and watch it. I'm gonna grind hard.
Yeah, tusen tack.
That.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadju, Iskander, Matt Pugnatio Rakula, Toucan, Travis Goff, Adam Oaks, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, J-Dubs, Jensen Gore, Joy, Joseph Ginsberg, Kovacevic, Tobias Bernasconi, Zumba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion, but also to Jeremy Dole. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want to ask me a question for one of my video AMAs? Want teasers? Find out who the guests are. Would you like to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.